Hey everybody, welcome to another low energy, low effort video for you guys. This is just how I can force myself to make videos. This is it. This is as good as it's gonna get for now. This year I read more books than I did last year. That's actually not true. But I did read some books and there were a few that were good. And there's a few that were just bad. I am of the opinion that a lot of books are bad. It's one of the reasons I struggle to read, is because I invest 6 or 7 hours, maybe, days reading this book, and it just sucks. And I could have been watching TV, or playing video games, or writing, or filming YouTube videos, and instead, I was reading this book. And it's not like a show where you put it on and you can just tell within the first episode or two that it's gonna suck. It's like sometimes you're like, well, I'm halfway through this book, maybe it'll get better. It doesn't. And I'm gonna say if you don't like it within the first couple chapters, you're never gonna finish it. Or you will, and then you'll hate yourself for finishing it. Anyways, that's not the point. The point is I read some books this year, and these are my recommendations. I'm going to start with a very controversial take. Okay. Atomic Habits by James Clear was not that useful. And I read it, and I enjoyed reading it. It was a good read. Then I was obsessed with it and tried to implement some of the tips and tricks that he suggests in the book, and it was a miserable failure. So I really feel like his whole systems strategy, where you set up these systems with oh, first I will make my coffee and I'll use that as the anchor habit, and then build off of that, oh, after I make my coffee, then I'll go put my shoes on, and then after I put my shoes on, I'll go for a run. This is for neurotypical people, okay? This is not how my brain works. It's not how whose brain works this way. Okay, what happens is I wake up, I go get coffee, that's true. I see a piece of garbage on the ground that my cat left, or my cat threw up or something, and then I clean that up, and then I, as I'm getting the stuff out to clean it, I see something else that needs to be put away, and then I stop that, switch tasks to that, and before you know it, the entire morning is gone. I have not exercised. I've cleaned up half the house, and then somewhere along the way I stopped to Google something, and then I'm on my phone, and now I'm sitting on the toilet scrolling through Instagram. No, James Clear. Do you just wake up in the morning, you get your cup of coffee, you see the cat throw up, and you just don't respond? Yeah, this guy was into sports, which is the first sign I should have known that this book was not for me. Great if you liked it. I will not ding it for the quality of the writing. I think it was very engaging. I read the whole thing. I was very optimistic that it would work for me. Unfortunately, no, not gonna work for me. I will rate it a self-help book out of 10. It's a 5 out of 10 because it's I think it could work for half a few people, but not for me. Next up, we have Atlas of the Heart by the lovely Brené Brown. This book was hot garbage. I'm sorry, Brené Brown. Nothing against you personally. I listened to the audiobook, and she actually read it, which was pretty nice, pretty cool. But it was a very boring book, I have to say. Atlas of the Heart is just Brené Brown explaining what emotions are. That's it. It's I already know what they are. Yeah, okay, oh, I haven't thought about disgust in a while, oh, interesting, but not really at all. Sorry, this is like very negative. I'm working up to the books I really enjoyed. We're gonna start with the ones I didn't like first. And I was, Brene Brown, I was hyped. I love Brene Brown. I listened to her little TED Talks. She's like insanely popular podcast. I really liked her first book, Daring Greatly. That one was great. This book was not, I did not like it. I don't know. I feel like I got a lot out of Daring Greatly. I feel like I don't remember a single insight or piece of advice from Alice of the Heart. I just remember her going through all the emotions. And she had like anecdotal stories and then like some science sprinkled in throughout there of like, oh, here's what this emotion. Yeah, you can skip this one. I would give it a solid like 6 out of 10. But well, I guess that no, you know what? I'm gonna rate this lower than Atomic Habits because Atomic Habits I at least enjoyed reading and was like excited about. This was just very meh. So I'm gonna say read Atomic Habits before you read this one. Not that they're the same genre at all. But alright, this next one's for all you communists and socialists out there. Bullshit Jobs, A Theory by David Graeber. This was a pretty entertaining, pretty interesting book. He talks a lot about why everyone hates their jobs and how their jobs don't contribute to society. And there's like some pretty alarming statistics that like, I don't remember if he said in the UK or something, but like more than half of people think that their jobs are useless. And like they could be replaced or if their job didn't exist tomorrow, it would be fine. And a lot of it's about like doing paperwork around processes that don't need to exist. So it's just like processes that exist for the sole purpose of someone having a job, which is basically a scathing review of capitalism and some major problems of capitalism, which is everyone has to work in order to live in capitalism, which means everyone needs a job, which means if there's not enough work to go around, we have to make up jobs. And that's exactly what's happening. So you have people wasting their entire lives doing paper pushing work, essentially for no reason other than to support capitalism. You know, I have not read Marx. I have not read any communist manifestos or anything. I'm very stupid. But this book kind of just reaffirmed what I've been hearing a lot, is that maybe we should get some like UBI up in this bitch instead of forcing people to work menial, useless jobs. Just so that Elon Musk can buy a space yacht or something. I don't know. What is the point of capitalism again? I'm not really sure. As far as a rating for Bullshit Jobs, I would say it was pretty entertaining and I would recommend it to most of my friends, so maybe like a 8 out of 10. Pretty good. Oh, hello, Cosmo. Ooh, ooh. What's your favorite book? Alright, next up we have the book Neurotribes by Steve Silberman. And this book is about kind of like, not the origin story of how autism became to be a concept, but I mean, it kind of is that, but it's also about like the history of autistic people. And it talks a lot about, Hans Asperger, I believe, the Nazi guy. Yeah, he was the guy that worked with autistic kids and other kids with disabilities. And he has a pretty bad rap now because he was a Nazi. But at the time, you know, he actually created Asperger's as a classification in order to keep these kids from being sent off to, like, the gas chambers, essentially. Which, like, is still shitty because he made the criteria that got other kids sent off to the gas chambers, basically saying that, like, Asperger's was more special and better because some of the kids were had special interests that were basically useful to society, like you know, the stereotypical Rain Man kind of very smart kids. So but that was interesting. I also learned, so this one was like reading a kind of a biographical novel about my family. Apparently this person kind of posits this theory that autistic people find each other because they get along well and then end up having kids, and so you have this kind of continuation of like the Neurotribe kind of theme that he's going around. He talks about like people in Silicon Valley, Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, people like that, Elon Musk too, who I know I just shat on earlier, but he also has autism spectrum disorder, so those people meet each other and kind of form these little groups, and that's kind of like Silicon Valley was like that. They mention ham radio operators in the 60s, which I don't even know if most of you know what that is, but it's basically people that used to communicate via telegraph to people across the world using radio signals. My grandpa was one of those, and it just this was just a super eye-opening book for me personally in kind of my own mental health journey and learning about maybe potentially my autism spectrum disorder. I have not been diagnosed officially. I have been diagnosed as ADHD, and there's a lot of overlap between the two, so who knows. I am still deciding if I want to get a diagnosis or not, because I'm just not sure if it's necessary for me or not yet. So that's Neurotribes. It was a good read. I read it pretty quickly. It was maybe a little dry, but overall I would highly recommend it for anyone who's interested in neurodiversity or thinks they might themselves have neurodiversity, so check it out. It was a pretty good read. I would also give it like an 8 out of 10. Maybe a 7.5 out of 10. I think Bullshit Jobs was a little more engaging. So on to the next one. Alright, next up is In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts by Gabor Mate. This one was kind of a sleeper that I did not expect was going to be so good. I just was like, oh, what is this? This seems interesting. And I thought it was just going to be stories about people with addiction, because this guy treated a bunch of people with addiction and homeless living in Montreal. And it was actually a very, very good book about the neuroscience of why people get addicted. And there was also, at the very beginning, starts with him talking about how he works with these people with addiction and kind of their stories and their perspectives, which I thought was awesome to have in there. Myself dealing with alcohol use disorder related a lot to a lot of the stories in there, even though obviously, you know, different levels of degrees as far as like the damage that the addiction had done in their lives. But it is already like in the top echelon of all the books I read this year. I would like already rate it a 9 out of 10 unless he like goes completely batshit at the end and says like, oh, it's all their fault. It's all the addict's fault. We should kill everyone that is addicted or something, which I don't think he will, because he would be in that himself. Sorry, that took a really dark turn. I don't know where I was going with that. Great. So yeah, 9 out of 10, definitely pick this up. I will be reading more of his books because this one was great and I loved it, and I'm going to finish it and get more of his books. Highly recommend. So you may have noticed a theme with all the books I read this year. A lot of them are self-help, and I know it's horribly cringy and sad to read self-help books constantly, but that's just what I do. So here's a break from all that. Here's a fun sci-fi novel that I forced myself to read so that I stopped reading self-help books. And this one is called The Sphere by Michael Crichton, who wrote famously Jurassic Park and a bunch of other really good sci-fi novels. You should check all of his work out. I've liked all of them, but that I've read. But this one is it's just a treat. It's a delight. It's really quite good. It's about a group of scientists, and there's a UFO, and they have to go research it, and the UFO is at the bottom of the ocean, and it's just an amazing, like, sci-fi, kind of like, I don't know, psychedelic, like, mystery suspense book, and it would be a great movie. They did turn it into a movie in, like, 1993, 1997, I don't remember, 2001, something, like, after Jurassic Park got super popular. They're like, what if we turned it into a movie? But then it sucked, because of course it did. But it could be a good movie. Okay. Definitely check it out. It was a quick little read. I couldn't put it down. Great book. I would actually say like 9.5 out of 10. Pretty freaking good. 10 out of 10. The Sphere. Go check it out. This last one is a little controversial. And Mom, if you watch this video, this is not about you. This is just the name of the book, okay? It's called I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy, who was the actress for Sam on iCarly. And this book was so freaking good, okay? I don't usually get sucked into books super easily. This one, just the way that she writes and her very strong voice and just like her cadence, I immediately consumed this. I think I finished the whole book in a day and a half. Audiobook again, because I can't read. But yeah, I'm Glad My Mom Died is about how basically her history of childhood abuse from her mother, who basically forced her to become an actress, was kind of forcing her to live out her own dreams, and just kind of how she viewed it as a child. And that's where her like writing voice became really just like super strong, super well done, because she's able to describe her logic and reasoning as a child very accurately. I feel like she remembers so much. I can't remember shit from my childhood. She remembers so many little details, and it just like fleshes out all of this just amazing details and tone of voice that she's able to capture with her writing. And it's just super helpful also, I think, to identify like, you know, abusive behaviors that you didn't even realize were abusive, and you can see like some of the things that she went through can be relatable even to people that weren't abused, but you know, maybe there were an abusive relationship later in life or something like that. And I think that this is like a good memoir, kind of outlining some of those red flags. And it's also a very controversial topic because she, you know, obviously the title is very provocative, because, you know, you're not supposed to say that ever. So it's a really good story about how she also is like, she actually ends up getting alcohol addiction. She struggles with an eating disorder. Just super, super interesting with how she deals with it, and super honest, super inspiring, I think, because she's so vulnerable and so honest. So I would highly recommend this book to basically anyone. And it's a 10 out of 10 for sure, like 11 out of 10. I would highly recommend it. And then also I became obsessed with Jeanette McCurdy a little bit, and I watched a bunch of her interviews about this book. So highly recommend you check those out too. And buy the books, please. Please support all these people that took the time to write the books. Don't torrent them or whatever. Especially Jeanette McCurdy. She deserves every single penny from this book because she got really screwed over by Nickelodeon. So yeah. Anyways, that is my 2022 recommendation list for books. It was a pretty, it's okay year. I think hopefully next year we'll find, some good books. Maybe less self-help this time. We both know it's not gonna happen. That's all I read. It's a disease. Please help me. I hope you guys all have a lovely new year. And if you have any book recommendations for next year, please, for the love of God, please recommend me some books, okay? Your girl needs some help. Alrighty. It's been great. Stay peachy, guys.